This session is intended to open to the floor any questions that you'd like to ask the expertise that we have here. And for those of you who weren't able to be here right from the beginning, we'll go from one end to the other, and if you'd like to introduce yourselves and basically what your company does in a few seconds, then that will enable things to move forward for the video particularly.
My name is Markell. I am the Eastern Regional Sales Manager for North America. I work for RaytecCCTV. We primarily manufacture LED illuminators, both white light and infrared, for use in the CCTV surveillance industry.
Okay, my name is Dave Heath, and I'm the Regional Sales Manager for Central Canada for Axis Communications. We manufacture IP video surveillance and other IP products. We have about 147 video products. We have 5 software products. We have a huge partner network with a lot of these gentlemen here in this panel. And we all work very merrily together in the IP video industry.
I'm McGurk. I'm with Logenex. We manufacture the world-renowned Tele-doorbell, and we also manufacture the new Teleport, which is an IP-based intercom system. So we are an intercom system company that specializes in access control.
And I am Suranjan Ray. I'm with Intelligent Security Systems out of New Jersey, and we are an enterprise video management solution that's pretty open architecture, and we also have a variety of video analytics components, license plate recognition, card container recognition, some face recognition solutions, things like that.
Okay, and I'm Hennings. I'm the CEO and President of the IP UserGroup, and I'm host and chair today. We'll start off with any questions from the audience on any subject pertaining possibly to what we've been talking about this morning, or beyond.
If you don't have questions, we can go home.
Yeah, I'm not unused to silence to start with, so perhaps I can kick something off. Oh, we've got a question.
You know what? Maybe I'd like to ask a question that is probably a bit of an off-angle one, but it might be appropriate for most of the people in the industry. Which of you sees an opportunity for a bigger market in video security outside of the traditional applications of surveillance and security as it relates to climate change that's occurring on the planet, and where infrastructure needs to be seen in real time by not only the people who are responsible for watching that particular dam or flood happening, but also access of that video to the public? Are you seeing any situations or scenarios occurring, or do you see it coming of age where that would be a business opportunity in the industry?
Do you mind if I start on that one?
Far away.
We actually, yeah, absolutely. There's definitely opportunities with that. And I was thinking that on the drive-in when I heard about the tornado touching down in Tarbolton, or I think it's called, just east of here, yesterday. And that's already happened, actually. In the UK, we have a number of sites with one of their monitoring, river monitoring stations, where they've used some video cameras and infrared illuminators powered off solar panels because of the low wattage draw of our particular product line that actually monitors the river levels and actually looks at the river levels and uses a form of analytics to make sure that they're not getting above a peak level, and to make sure that there's no risk of flooding. So it's definitely going to happen more and more often, and we're probably going to have to see that with some very creative power solutions, just because of the remote nature of some of those locations that's going to be installed in.
Yeah, and agreed, and I'll jump in on that one too. I mean, there are hundreds of deployments out there by environmental groups, specialty interest groups that are actually using IP video, analytics, and everything else in some really strange but off the reservation type of applications. We're looking at a lot of those opportunities from a completely different perspective. Like you said, thinking outside that security box is where the future is. We talked many times in all these presentations about business intelligence or just general intelligence out of these systems, and the combined technology and what they can offer other applications, whether it be, say, environmental, industrial, looking forward. the climate change issue is a really interesting one, because now it opens up whole new avenues. We're not just watching facilities now. You think of the environmental groups that are watching like animal migration patterns up north and stuff like that. They're using this technology for that application.
Actually, a lot of our products have been used to track migratory patterns of birds. There's one application in Hawaii that an illuminators and a camera is basically pointed straight up to the sky, and the researchers knows that they're birds, but all you see on the actual video and the images are these little grayish dots, because they're that high up, and it's tracking them and tracking how power lines, how they interact with power lines as well. It's pretty interesting. I mean, if you look at the image, it doesn't look like much because it's like these little gray specks. But when you get told on the case study exactly what they were monitoring, it's very very cool. And that actually reminds me, we have a ton of case studies on different uses and different markets available on our website and through me. So if you wanted to kind of think outside the box and look what other dealers around the world are using and using these systems for, then feel free to get in touch with me and get access to those case studies and just to change your perspective on how to use IP video.
And what about from the VMS viewpoint?
So what we look at it from is like we have an integrator out of New Jersey. Their parent company out of Switzerland. They do a lot of flood management in China and some of the new dams. So where we come in is sort of what we could do is essentially take the data coming from Raytec or from Access and create that visualization platform, right? So the two things we do is sort of try to connect the dots. So if you have all this data, we try to present it in a way that makes sense visually. And then obviously what we could develop, we have not done so yet, but we could develop is video analytics if we're looking for specific patterns. So what we're always looking for from an analytics standpoint is patterns and what makes what, either from what's routine or what's sort of an exception. And if that can be defined, then we can look for those patterns over there. For instance, with the birds flying overhead, if there's some kind of if birds are not flying or the number of the count is reduced, that could become an analytic and we can potentially create more reporting based on that, for instance.
Can you comment, Frank?
Just with climate change, with Logenex, we're about 80% residential, so wherever people live, we make sure their door stations work and all sorts of that.
Yeah, I'd just be curious. Obviously, we have some manufacturers here, and with the IP industry, and it's coming from the security, and as you might also mention, an access, you're getting it from the IT end. But at the end of the day, it's all about sales and where is the company moving. So how is it that you're finding? How is it that, if I can get maybe just a quick answer from each of you, how is it that your corporations are approaching this, two different types of industries? Because IT really isn't security. Security really, historically, really has never been IT. So to transition or to, like, are you going off in one direction and let's hit the IT market, or are we trying to get the security industry up to IT? We trying to take IT and make them security? I mean, I'm just curious because it's a question that kind of, I'm sure every company that works to move your types of products has to, digest internally and then move on that.
Well, I can go first. I can tell you from our perspective, because we, like I said, we came from the IT space. When we originally started marketing the video surveillance product, we actually were targeting the IT sector. Right, that's where we came at it first. And you look at all our marketing material back from the early 90s and moving forward and that sort of thing. And then we did a whole paradigm shift. So we thought, okay, we're looking at the wrong market now. The traction is actually coming from the security side. So let's now market towards a security integrator. So as time went on, we changed everything. We focused on the security integrator. Even when it comes to our distribution, we now distribute within both areas. We pick distributors in the security market. We pick distributors in the IT space as well. So we did attack them separately. But the truth of the matter is it is not two separate verticals anymore. There is a true convergence there. We are dealing with the same people. Right? We said that, I had in my presentation those metrics that we had there talking about who we're talking to now. The security department is building, a demand from the security side. The IT department is administrating it. So they have their issues and their priorities. But now, not only that, now we're also adding a third dynamic that we didn't even talk about, which is all of those other surrounding departments within that organization. Now we're talking about operations, right? We're talking about warehousing, logistics departments, and that sort of thing, all of their own needs and desires, and we're bundling it all into one package. So as a manufacturer now, it's almost, we can't differentiate between IT and security anymore, or now even operations. We have to bundle that together and look at it from a single perspective. When we're from a development side, from a manufacturing side, I'm sure these guys will tell you the same thing from a software side as well. We're all looking at it from that very same perspective now. We've grown as the industry's grown and changed, right? It's always in flux like everything else. And I think that's how we look at that perspective. I would never say now that there is a divide between IT and security. I think it's very much a merged group.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of convergence. What we're finding a lot of places is the needs are a little different, but both have equal weights as far as what they need to do. So security, a lot of times looking at it from just physical security and their needs as far as whether it's securing an area or whatever. IT, there's a lot of more compliance issues also as well. They want to make sure what's sitting on their network has a lot of, has been sort of battle tested. It's going to not cause other grief and things like that. There is definitely a lot of convergence. What we also though see is, and I think you'll agree, you may agree with me if you see this too, is I see a lot of times security becoming a subset of the IT department in a lot of larger organizations where traditionally IT has had bigger budgets. And there's sort of more and more as appliances move out of being home runs of cable to becoming another device on the network, it's becoming more and more where IT manages it. And security, a lot of times, especially in larger organizations, is almost a client to IT. And so they're using a system that's sort of being managed, administrated, and sort of decided upon by IT in a lot of cases, is what we find. Do you see that as well, to any degree?
I would agree to a certain sense. Like I said, over time, initially it was the security department's putting stuff on the network. So there was actually almost a diversity there, right, at the very, very beginning. But now I think, like you said, with that convergence of those two systems, you really have to work together. Now it's one shared network or one shared infrastructure. It may be separate VLANs at the end of the day, but it's a shared infrastructure there. So even sharing costs. And now moving forward, that's what I think all of us have talked about that at some point in time, about how do you make sure you get those deployments out there is by looking at both areas, security and IT, and having that cost share to be able to jointly get a project off the ground.
At a particular airport that we have our products in, it's actually the IT manager that gives the go-ahead as the primary decision maker for the security. They do have a chief of security that basically presents and builds the systems and presents them to the IT manager, where he gives the thumbs up or thumbs down based on that. So you're really, you almost have to have a sales, I'm not going to say pitch, but basically tailor your sales and your marketing to the security side of things, and then also the IT. It's basically intertwined and almost, but chief decision maker typically tends to be that IT person from what we've seen recently.
I think one of the other things is as we were talking about before, about convergence. Convergence is a technical term. I think that from the business ownership management side of things, they're looking at consolidation as a word, which means bringing more than one business function together and utilising the infrastructure that they have at hand. It happens to be an IP network. The applications are many and various within their operation, one of which happens to be security. And bringing them all in and consolidating the activity with the economy of scale, etc., that brings together. Now, whether that's managed at board level or within the IT department, whether there's people who've got sufficient skills to be able to design and architect that entire infrastructure, well, that's another question. We've got some guys here from Bell who probably experience this on a daily basis, I have no doubt. But the concept of consolidating business applications, which includes facilities management and security and other safety elements onto the same network, is just a bit of a no-brainer when it comes down to it. it's strange because other industries have gone through the same pain barrier, if you wish. Where there's a political will, generally from the manufacturer at one end and the end user at the other end, to make things happen, they happen. And the interconnectivity between those happens as a matter of course. The old photocopier industry is a prime example, where you had a room with a lady in it who did your photocopies for you years ago. And that was her domain, it was run basically by a secretary, and it was a standalone unit. Then over time that changed, and they became desktop units where you had just maybe a shared, going back to Axis again, print server, maybe a shared, and one or two devices on an old-fashioned coax network, and then they became multifunctional devices and they became individual for each one. Then the manufacturers saw the opportunity to start networking devices, so each one was separate. And the political will within the industry, and the advantage is that they communicated down through their distribution chains, most of which were working things like copy plans. I don't know whether you remember those, where you paid per copy on a copier, or you paid for the paper through a particular distributor, and that's how they made their money. And they effectively leased you the equipment. But those arrangements where they've got certified engineers on their equipment, they've got the right skill sets, they've got the political will within the organisation that they were working for, and the political will within the manufacturing side of the equipment to get everything up to speed, and they made it happen, and they made it happen very, very successfully. You know, there's more certified network engineers within the business machinery industry probably than any other industry around the world. So you do need not only one foot in both camps, but at the end of the day you need the political will. You need to put it in the right place to get the decisions made so that this consolidation will happen and work appropriately. Any other comments on that one, guys? Any questions from the floor?
Maybe I can just make a comment.
Sure.
When, like, I've been in the security industry for online based person, I know enough to be dangerous, probably, but not enough to run full speed. But where I've seen the security industry go over the years, it's becoming more of a business partner within an organization. Instead of being a roadblock or a speed bump even to a lot of the things in the industry, it's now becoming more of a business partner where we're supporting as a core service to the other departments that are within the same organization. And so things like when you were talking there, it came to mind, we use our access card credentials for photocopiers now within our organization. So you don't have to know where that photocopier is when you're in a different building, right? Or what that number is, or what's the IP number for that copier, or what, so instead when you're printing, you just walk to the printer, use your card, and it will print. It recognizes who you are, it goes and finds what you sent out, and it'll print it to that printer. And so by creating those types of synergies, it shows more value for what we do and what we can provide to support other groups. And it's hugely tied into IT and working with them and creating those partnerships. And if you don't, I don't think there's much of a future for us in security, especially from the physical security standpoint. Soon our access cards won't be required. Right? You won't need that hard credential. And so when that comes, that's going to change a lot of different things. So I think that's part and parcel. This starting to tie into other systems and lighting and HVAC and LEED certification programs and showing where we can benefit from lighting and things like that as people arrive at their place of business. So it will turn on the lights that are driven from where they are right now to where their office is, but it won't turn on everything. You don't have to turn on the full HVAC system. Long gone are the days where you had to call 24 hours in advance to have an operations person program the system to make sure it turned on. You're going to pay a fortune for that if you had to have somebody work. And it's creating those synergies so business can work more efficiently and leaner. And I think that's where we show the value in the future, not in locking the door or unlocking. So just my thought.
I think that there's some really good examples. There's one in Chicago at a university, and there's another one I think down in Cardiff in the UK, where they've got a single card, access, vending, library services, you name it, and it's all a single card. Now obviously eventually that's going to be, if you've got the appropriate smartphone in your pocket, and you know, again, as we were talking about earlier on, RFID type scenarios, but it's managed centrally, along with access with video verification, plus all the other wonderful things, dormitory access, all those sort of things, because they're, you know, extremely sensitive. Energy management is fundamentally important when you're running a campus of those sizes. You know, if you can save a few watts here and there, it probably pays for your kit after a year or so. So, you know, but again, there's this need to be able to introduce that scenario into the mix when you're presenting when the proposition comes up in the first place. I'm saying we need to go in this direction because we will want these benefits as time goes on, and the technology will either lead or will be made available as it's required. So I think it's very positive for the industry, really, providing they, as a group, you embrace it. I think that's the key thing, as opposed to at arm's length, which is a little bit of the case in the UK at the moment, I'm afraid. Any other questions, guys? I've got a couple that I'd like to throw in, if I may. The first one, and the audience may well like to get involved with this one, is the true understanding of what OnViv is all about, and whether it's an important element when either specifying or designing a system.
So from a VMS standpoint, you know, we do, for instance, with Axis, we do a native integration, so because we want a lot of extra features. But the reality is, it actually, the biggest thing OnViv does from our standpoint is gives us a certain standardization. So we know at a certain level, our resellers aren't going to get stuck if they bought a camera that we don't have an integration with directly. The other thing, it sort of helps some of the smaller camera vendors and such, sort of, an ISS or Genetec or Milestone aren't necessarily going to be able to integrate every camera manufacturer out there, right? So it sort of evens the playing field to a degree and gives some smaller companies an opportunity, both on the VMS side and the camera side. Now with OnViv, I guess it's C protocol with the access control. We're starting to see that even with access control. Because for us, we've sort of over the last few years we've standardized, and now we, again, with certain partners, we have a very deep integration, but we know we can support pretty much any camera in the marketplace. Access control is a nightmare, so we have to integrate each access control. The APIs are totally foreign, each one. Some don't have APIs, they're an SDK, which means we're putting foreign code into our source code. It becomes really a pain. Whereas with a certain standardization, same thing. We're gonna have certain enterprise access controls. We do a very deep integration, but at least that interoperability becomes key in the long run. Now, there's just, at the end of the day, as much as it's good for us, it's really good for the reseller, because everything becomes to a certain degree future-proof, right? They're not buying something that, oh, now they're stuck without, they can't change it. They bought an access control, they can't change a VMS. You know, an example of this is we work with, in New York and New Jersey, we work with, it's the Port Authority there. It's one of the largest, like, quasi-public agencies, right? And they have systems in place that they don't love, but they cannot change it because they're investing millions into it. And what something like OnViv does is it sort of really gives people a lot more options, the end user and the manufacturer.
No, I mean, OnViv, at its conception, the idea of OnViv was, you know, we were fighting against the ugliest word in the security industry in the past, which was proprietary. Right, it's the equivalent of a four-letter word for security, and that was the problem right from the beginning. Right, in the analog days, before IP, that's just how it worked. You had to buy this guy's cameras, this guy's recording system, this guy's hardware, this guy's expansion hardware. He wanted to matrix something, you had to do all that. So the idea is, I mean, the internet and the network and IP protocol is built on one simple philosophy, right? Interconnectivity, one standard. As manufacturers, though, it's still an industry, it's still a business. We do have to keep certain things close to heart. So, as you said, there are going to be certain manufacturers working at certain levels with certain partnerships where there is much deeper integration, because there is still an element of internal product security, right? What our applications are, what our devices can do. There has to be something, and it's still a business and it's still competitive. OnViv was supposed to even that playing field. for everyone at the end of the day, right? Exactly like from ISS point of view, it's the same thing. We have to make sure that there's some way to let everyone in, because that really is the nature of IP and the nature of the network, and what the whole system was built on, was that interoperability. So there has to be that at some level. Is OnVIF perfect? No, it's definitely not, right? It is basically your basic access to a video stream is what you get with OnVIF at the end of the day. Right now, no, we're still early. It's not that old. OnVIF isn't that old. So it's still a work in progress for that level. Someday, there's a possibility that we will have that completely open platform for everyone. But at this point in time, I think we've come across at least that one hurdle so we can say, no, there's not much left in this industry anymore that's proprietary. At some point in time, we do have a level of integration between everyone.
That's a huge first step, and it really is in the right direction. It sort of made the whole industry focus, and what you said is a great point, is security was one of the few things that was becoming more and more IT-centric that wasn't really following that standard of this open interoperability, right? We were still able to sort of protecting their things and their relationships, and you could only integrate with this system. And OnVIF sort of brought us in line with what IT really is all about, is where everything needs to, your value stands on your product. It's not just that you're protecting a relationship. And so every product can now more and more talk to each other, which is really the best way to move forward.
Any comments from the audience? Are you finding the OnVIF confusing or useful?
I think it's pretty useful, but the problem is because different measures deploy the OnVIF in different versions. So still there's some mess in between, so it's not always interoperable between different manufactured products.
Yeah, I mean, it's a work in progress like anything else. As the technology changes, every time we have a new video compression, we have to rewrite the OnVIF protocol to be able to deal with that. So like technology, it's a dream, right? It's a dream to have that completely open platform and everything be totally, operating together and converged. But in reality is technology moves so fast. There's always going to be a level of catch up. We'll get better at it. OnVIF will get better at it as time goes on. As manufacturers, we'll get better at it as well, I think.
Most of the EMS, not just mine, but most of the guys I see as my competitor, we're pretty backwards compatible with OnVIF. So if you have like a S protocol and you have an OnVIF 2, they're sitting on the same VMS platform. So the reality is, in most cases, we're able to mitigate that. Even if devices are different, I mean, you can have OnVIF 2, you can have OnVIF S, and you can have OnVIF C access control. And what's tying it together is, whether it's a PSIM or a VMS, that's the key, right? Is because before that would have been an issue. If you had, before OnVIF, you had two different access cameras with two different codecs, we had to make sure every single codec we were always updating. But with OnVIF, we'll keep updating our OnVIF compatibility, but we're going to continue to support the old OnVIF systems. So it actually makes it a lot easier to tie these different systems together. If you have legacy cameras that were the first generation OnVIF, they'll work if you buy new access cameras today. And that's a big plus.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, well, I'll throw in another curveball for you. I was watching the game last night. The wholesale deployment of IP video. Okay, now we've seen from various stats that we're looking at crossover time. We're looking at the proportion of cameras out there that are IP related. What do you each see as the core reason for perhaps the slowness isn't really, for the not being wholesale deployment of IP? What do you see as the main reason why? Is it education? Is it technological advance? Is it economy? What are your views?
I think it's a combination of education and the economy. The key is with us to educate our customers on what our products can and can't do and how they can integrate with others. And it's tough to keep in that perspective is what they're doing. So education is key for us.
I see education for sure, especially on the lighting side of things, in terms of getting the best pictures at night, especially with the higher and higher megapixel cameras start coming into essentially deployment with CCTV systems. Getting the message out there as to what the images you can expect and how to better them is definitely the key thing that we're looking at from a company sales and marketing standpoint. Educating the customers, showing them what the difference is, asking them to check their nighttime video without illuminators, and then encouraging them to try out and demo the nighttime video with illuminators, and just making them see for themselves that there is a difference and there's a better way.
I would agree very strongly on that sense, but I think it's a 50-50 split. There's two factors at play here. First of all, it's the investment, right? Infrastructure, up until very recently, when it comes to security, has always been analog. It's coax cable. How much of it's still out there? Tons of it. Like I said, still 1 in 4 cameras are only now still IP in today's day and age. So there's a huge investment. You take a look at what it costs. Yes, I'd love to have the features of IP video. It would be fantastic. But am I going to be able to afford the deployment, even that one IP camera, if I have to replace all that existing infrastructure? And that has a lot to do with it. There's definitely economics factor there. It's a very, very difficult thing to overcome, especially on a large scale. If you're a large corporation, mid-sized to enterprise even, or multinational, you have to look at the cost of dollars and cents. Is that viable for you to replace that infrastructure? There are a lot of solutions to that in the IP world, right? We can convert coax, utilize it as an IP channel. We can do a lot. We can send PoE over coax. We can do a lot of things with it. But there's a big hindrance there when it comes to that existing deployment. Talk about the UK, how much coax is going there.
I think those copper mines down in the West Country, they must have been working really hard to find that lot.
It's unbelievable. So that is a hindrance. And you're right, as everybody else has said, education is primary. I mean, whose responsibility is that? We all have a piece of that, right? As manufacturers, we're trying to educate our customers, which are you guys as the integrators, right? The integrators are out there educating the end users. Well, there's that telephone line, right? The message gets a little lost as it goes down there. So, I mean, at the top, we have to take responsibility here and really focus on education. And I think you're looking at a bunch of companies here that are very, very good educators in the industry. Very, very strong. Perhaps it's a really good point. Perhaps we have to look a little bit closer at the end users as well.
Yeah,
bring them into those programs.
A lot of it is end user driven. I think a lot of it is, I'd say it's more maybe a 40-60 or even 30-70 cost. And you know what it is, especially, and I'm assuming Canada went through it, probably not to the degree that the US did, but the downturn in the economy over the last few years, I mean, we saw, forget about security budgets, we saw IT budgets of some of our partners slashed in half. I mean, they had to do the same amount of work with barely anything. And it was a question of, do you upgrade to IP or do you lay off like 20 people, right? And thank God they chose to keep the people and delay the IP, because they can do that in a couple of years. So I think with the economy sort of at least stabilizing a little bit, I think that those numbers are going to start changing. You will see companies that are waiting to do investments into IP will start doing it, but it's going to take time. I mean, the bigger the organization, I mean, it's really, I mean, it's easy to wire a hotel like this and change it to IP, but when you have multiple buildings, multiple campuses, different, like 30-story buildings and such, I mean, you're talking multi-million-dollar investments, right? So it is going to be sort of a slow process and a transition. It's going to take years. And until then, the reality is IP cameras are superior to analog, but analog has gotten to a degree where it's not terrible, and some people are just able to survive for another year before they go with IP. I think a lot of it is going to be as the economy gets better, we'll start seeing more IP getting sold.
That's certainly been the case in the UK, less so in Europe, I would have said. But I think one of the things that we found key during these presentations and quiz sessions in the past is the educational issue. And not only about the technology, but hang on a minute, I'm actually selling to somebody different now. Don't necessarily speak the language. And the support from you guys up here in terms of how can I get my commercial message across to my customer, the benefits of IP, I need some help. Yeah, we can work out the technology. We can work on that, but I need some commercial assistance on being able to communicate the benefits, the return on investment, the true cost of ownership, and those sort of things, and package those up so that my customers understand that, and then we can get a greater level of deployment. And I think, in terms of the forum and particularly these sort of discussions, I think it's crucial that we keep banging on, I guess. Educate.
Can I make a comment related to that? Because I was involved in strategy and research on that 10, 12 years ago when we thought, oh, there was Gartner and all these other research groups were saying 2 years from now it's going to switch over 50% more. The delay, I think, is a different aspect as well. That is that analog has improved somewhat, and if you've got these, you can get these low-cost DVRs with the remote web access, which gives people, the functionality that they think is more than sufficient for their applications, and they don't have to conflict with what they consider to be still less than reliable internet and network-based systems in many companies that don't have dedicated IT staff anymore, and they farm it out to third-party integrators, and the network goes down, and the internet goes down. I want my own fixed system. It's completely secure. It's more independent. And so you've got many other things, as well as analog has improved somewhat, but it's still very easy and low cost to throw in a 16-camera system and a 16-channel DVR with remote web access, and then compare that with connecting it to the IP network and all the infrastructure and the management that's required to keep it going, is another extra cost that many companies and small organizations can't afford.
Well, I think we addressed that. We both addressed that. Paul addressed that in his original presentation when he talked about looking at as manufacturers, how we're looking at it. Where's the R&D going now? It's going into IP. Where's the analog going? The investment isn't there anymore. There isn't really a future. And analog right now is really a dead end because we said there's no future-proofing of that technology. There's no additional business.
The reality is in new construction where you have like a new building going up or anything like that, I bet you the percentage of IP is 80% in new infrastructure, But the reality is on legacy infrastructure, it's funny, to some degree, not in a bad way, but the world's largest IP camera company is sort of its own worst enemy, right? Because it's got a great line of encoders. And what it's allowed it to do is it's allowed it to sort of then, like I said, organizations didn't have the money to do a whole-scale infrastructure change, but they could buy access blades and things like that. So you are, even though probably that slowed down the transition to some degree, that's sort of the next bridge. So what I can say is, I almost, like ISS, we have encoder cards. We don't ever use them anymore. I'd rather just use access encoders. It just works better, right? And now we get to do thin blades instead of having big 4U servers. And what I find is that's a great transition. So almost any time, whether it's us, Milestone, Genetec, there's no more really consideration of analog anymore. So either if it's new construction, we know it's IP, it's going to be access cameras or whatever. If it's old retrofits, there's probably that bridge going in, which is the access encoder, right? So
I developed encoders more than 10 years ago, and for analog cameras, put them on the network, and we had exactly the same conversation, exactly the same discussions 10 years ago.
I'll tell you, I don't see that.
They're more widespread now, but it's still fundamentally, people still have it, because as you're saying, the number of analog cameras and analog installations is still strong, and there's not, and you talk about new buildings, there's only limited numbers of new construction new buildings, and if you look at Bell, I'm sure they have lots of old premises around where they have physical, well, you're part of the telecom industry, so you're...
But you're looking at, here we are, like I said, we're largest encoder manufacturer in the world, right? We've been doing that since '98 as well. We saw that there's obviously there's a transition period there longer than we expected. A lot of factors. But why do you put in an encoder now instead of a DVR? Because a DVR is a dead end.
I was going to say, I respect your opinion, but at an enterprise level, I don't necessarily get involved in 16-camera systems. We sell them, but those are distribution. The stuff I look at...
But that's where the numbers, when you're talking about the total numbers of IP versus analog.
Well, that's sort of like saying, hybrids and electric vehicles here, but gas-powered cars are not going to go anywhere either, right? So what you're looking at is sort of the vanguard, and it is the percentage that's going IP either new construction, which actually in the U.S. there is starting to become a boom again. And I see the number of, just like, I mean, I sit over here on the 401 while I'm here, so I see the number of new construction going on right around the 401, and it is starting to come back. But the reality is, once you're at an enterprise level, I don't think there's an IT director or even a security manager that, out of choice, is staying completely analog, right? They're either, they got the money and they're starting to wire up, or they're putting in access encoders, because it's a lot more, what we see as a VMS manufacturer is an access encoder, and it's not being patronizing to access, is much, much more stable than using any other kind of technology to
Where
use
is the
access.
unit volume coming from analog then that's keeping it up there, and IP is?
There's, I mean, but it's a different market, right? And we're not going to necessarily, you know, I mean, like I said, one of our largest customers in North America is a chain of convenience stores, and I don't see them going to IP anytime soon, because the bottom line is it's just too expensive. But that's a different set. I mean, even though it's a several 4,000 camera deployment, it's subsets of 15 or 16 or 20. But anytime you go into like Dell, I'm sure you guys, I don't know if you have, but I'm sure your preference is to go IP, or at least go to encoding, right? Any organization has probably made that determination.
But look at all the big retailers with thousands of locations that have 10, 15 cameras, like Tim Hortons or whatever, and some of them have probably moved to IP, but many of them still have just basically a hierarchical system.
It goes back to that infrastructure cost again.
Yeah.
It's that infrastructure. What is the overall cost to replace the infrastructure? It's not the device, right? Device, they've come up. There's a parallel now, right? Where IP and analog have met, where it's no longer as expensive. It's the infrastructure cost is what a lot of what's holding it back. But at the end of the day, there's some point in time that those Tim Hortons stores are going to want to do facial recognition. They're going to want to do identification.
They wanted to do it 5 years ago.
Exactly. But do you have the pixel density on an analog camera to be able to do that effectively? No, you don't. You're going to have to replace that camera.
And I think, if I can make a comment too, like, I've worked for a lot of big organizations, so I'm not speaking on behalf of Bell necessarily, just for the video. But when I've looked at older systems, and I've had a lot of analog systems for the years, and I move over to an IP-based system, it's a big cost. But it's a big cost in moving over from keys to access control. It's a cost to be able to do a lot of different things when it comes to security. But if you work more on a educational standpoint, because that's a huge part. I can't tell you how many times I have internal clients, right? I'm no different than an integrator, but I'm an internal integrator within most of the organizations I've been in. And I have to sell the product I'm bringing into the organization. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard, why don't I just go to Costco and get a camera system, right? And that's part of what my job is to do as an internal integrator, is to educate the people that I'm working with and that I'm servicing as a client group to say, well, let's look at not just the cost from one to the other. Let's look at what you're trying to accomplish. What's your objective? And I can then give you, based on me being the SME or the subject matter expert, I can direct you to what would satisfy your needs the best, right? And then let's look at cost. Because let's get you what you need first, and then let's look at, and I think you addressed that in the original slides, right? It's creating those partnerships, looking at your partner before you're looking at cost in the end.
Yeah.
And then looking at technology first as well. And it's coming up with that, looking at a risk-based solution model in front of them. So, and if you've got that, I mean, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be, like a team of 30 guys working on this risk-based solution. It just needs to be something that you can get across to them. And if you can communicate that and that value across, I think people will migrate. And they may not migrate the whole organization all at once, but maybe you migrate your most critical facilities. Maybe you migrate where you've got your biggest exposure, or your most theft, or and then show value there, and then let it continue to grow. And I think that's the key. If you're just going to go after dollars,
How old is the business analytics side of things in terms of in terms of what it can do and what the points you mentioned, the key points you mentioned on screen? Is that 2 years old, 3 years old, or is it older than that, newer than that?
Well, I think we're the business, the analytics themselves. If you look at the amount of analytics that were on the market 2 years ago, it's quadrupled.
Okay.
Right? So looking back 4 or 5 years again, yes, there was a lot less of an argument towards business intelligence 4 or 5 years ago than there is now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But again, it's like anything else. That's driven from the end user.
Exactly.
It's your customers who are asking for that. So are you going to go back in and you're going to say, my customers, we're going to demand it. We may not want this today, but we know that a couple of years from now, we're going to want that. Are you going to sell me something that's future-proof, that's going to be able to do that, to be able to meet those future requirements? You're going to something that's going to be good today. And that's the solution from an integrator's point of view you have to look at. Are you really looking at your customer and giving them the best solution that's going to last?
But that means bringing the integrator up to speed,
Absolutely.
which I think is fundamental.
Yeah, but analytics is a good example, even what you were saying with the IP cameras is, our industry in general, I think, over sort of emphasizes how fast things are going to turn around. I mean, 10 years ago, there was business intelligence and analytics. It was horrific. We were even playing around with it. And what I saw was, it's funny, we're the number one VMS in South America. A big portion of our projects have analytics. Very small percentage of them in the U.S. or in Canada have analytics because there were analytics companies that were VC funded, and they just threw out that, we can do everything, we were one of the finalists on a major transit system and our CTO pulled us out of the running because, I was telling one of the gentlemen in the back is, how do you do something like object recognition in a really, really crowded environment 10 years ago, What I'm hearing is potentially that can be doable now, right? But it was promised 10 years ago, and what happened was analytics just got such a bad name. Half the time I'm scared to even say we're an analytics company because people, and that's why we've sort of gone away from some of the more subjective stuff into some of the more objective ones where we have a metric. Because, I can tell you if that face is right or wrong. I can tell if that license plate is right or wrong. And what we've also done is, in the object stuff, what we've done is we've created our own platform. So we have our own things, but we also will integrate third party. Because the reality is, it's gotten much slower because of these huge flameouts from companies that overpromise and didn't deliver. And I think what happened with IP is the same thing. Not exactly the same exact analogy, but I think the whole industry they saw like the first access camera go from prism to access to camera, and they were like, wow, this is the future, it's going to happen in 3 years. And nobody thought about the fact that there was billions of dollars of wiring to get from point A to point B, right? And then suddenly that became an issue. But really, I mean, if you see it, it's slower than maybe we expected. But sure, I mean, again, from a VMS standpoint, I see almost everything I'm touching is somehow IP, whether it's actually IP or going to an encoder. 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. 10 years ago, 90% of our business was analog. So it is starting to change. The price point market was taking off.
The IP in those is at the back end.
Pardon?
The IP is at the back end and the network management side, whereas the analog side is at the cameras. I'll make another point. Question to Axis, probably would know more than anybody. One of the single largest markets for video cameras has been, will continue to be, retail. So if you look at retail stores, restaurants, gas stations, 2 to 20 cameras or whatever per location, these places don't have money. I mean, they are so stretched for dollars that, an enterprise or an airport is going to spend the money on a full IP thing with. The retailers would love, and I've met with many of the Subway and people like that, 36,000 locations would love to have all kinds of data coming in from analytics and recognition of traffic patterns, the rest of it, so they can afford to do it at Costco and Home Depot, but not in these smaller locations. But there are so many thousands of them, so many cameras, the sheer number, is where I think the issue is, which may hold back the total numbers compared to IP.
It is the most price-sensitive market there is out there, especially small retail and independent retail. It is definitely the most price-sensitive market. But we've talked a couple times, there are solutions out there. We actually look at that segment completely differently. No, we're not selling them enterprise solutions. We're not selling them on large enterprise VMS platforms. We're looking at other options for those guys because it is price-sensitive. We say, okay, let's look at cloud solutions. Let's look at onboard storage. We use edge storage. Axis uses edge storage as a solution for them. You want to eliminate a DVR? We give you a camera with an SD card and free software. That's how we do it. That's how we get them there. I apologize first. But it is. And that's exactly that. Those are the issues of that market.
So the strategy is to make that change or move it up past 50%.
That's right. But once they have that device there, we've met their requirement, we've given them the device, we've brought them into the 21st century, we've given them IP video, we've made it very cost effective for them, we've given them a solution. Once it's there, then they can make that decision to add that intelligence after the fact. At least we've given them that option as opposed to dead-ending them.
I think looking at some of the developments, and I know that Microsoft are involved in some quite frightening developments around retail profiling, being able to identify things that we don't even know we're doing in a retail environment. But you need good footage. Now, that means that they will inevitably have to be digital end-to-end. And I think that brings on to another question about the percentage. You say, well, there's only 20% IP cameras, or it's only 20% IP. Well, what's IP? End-to-end IP, yeah, probably 20%. Norbane, the biggest distributor in the UK, had a meeting with them, and we had exactly that discussion, that question. What percentage is IP? One guy, the guy who sold the cameras, said 15, maybe 20% over the next year or so. And the other guy, who sold the network-ready DVRs and whatever, he said, I'm doing everything is connected. Everything that goes out, as far as I'm concerned, has an IP connection with all the network advantages that it has. So there are some vested interests that like to show analog as being out there and more successful, and there are others that would disagree with that in different parts of the world. But I think at the end of the day, the migration is happening. The wave is just pitching over, and there's no stopping it now. And it's just a question of when and not whether. Okay, any other observations, guys? Any questions that you'd like to bring up from the panel? Anything that you'd like to discuss? Should we call it a day? Thanks very much for your time. I hope you found this session interesting, and we'll be back. I'm not quite sure when. Thanks very much indeed. Cheers.